Good morning and welcome to this morning's meeting of the Development Management Review Committee. This meeting will be carried out under the Council's hybrid procedures. It will be recorded and broadcast on the YouTube channel. Members and officers who are remote, can you please keep your microphones on mute unless you're speaking, and if you want to speak, please use the electronic hands up. Members in the room can use the physical hands up. Okay, that's the preliminaries. Item 1 on the agenda, any apologies or substitutions?
Yes, Convener, an apology from Councillor Fairweather with Councillor Gall substituting.
Thank you. And declarations of interest or transparency? No declarations of interest or transparency. Okay, move on to item 3, which is the minute of the previous meeting, and that was the meeting on the 15th of August. Is that a correct minute? Okay, I see nods of heads there. Thank you for that. Okay, we'll move on to the first piece of business today, which is item 4, the site of the former Links Hotel, 8 Links Parade, Carnoustie. And I'll hand over to Mr. Christensen, who is our planning advisor this morning, and he will take us through this item.
Thank you, Convener. Good morning, members. Good morning, members. I'm Paul Christensen of the Development Plan Team at Angus Council, present today as Independent Planning Advisor to the committee. I can confirm that I have had no previous involvement in the application and that I have no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant or any interested party. The case in front of members of the Dmrc seeks review for the non-determination of an application for planning permission for the erection of 8 residential flats at the site of the former Links Hotel, 8 Links Parade, Carnoustie. The application site measures approximately 1,018 square metres and is located to the north of Links Parade. The application site is currently vacant. It previously contained the Links Hotel, a Victorian 2.5-storey building which was demolished around 2008. The north of the site is Taymouth Street and the main East Coast Railway line beyond. The Caledonia Golf Club lies to the east, with the Carnoustie Championship Golf Course beyond the public road to the south. A private dwelling house lies to the west. The boundaries of the application site are formed by stone walls and fencing. Moving on to the slides. The first slide is the location plan. It shows the site, red line area here, my cursor, Links Parade to the south, Taymouth Street to the north, and beyond that, the East Coast Railway line. The Carnoustie Championship Golf Course lies further to the south of Links Parade. The proposed site plan, the footprint of the building is approximately 348 square metres. It's 2 blocks of flats, 4-storey in height, with 8 flats in total. The next slide shows the proposed ground floor plan. Again, it shows 2 blocks of flats, shown by my cursor. To the south is some limited parking from Links Parade. Majority of the parking is from Taymouth Street to the north. The proposed plans, we have a first floor plan on the left, the second floor plan in the middle, and the proposed roof plan to the right. The layout of the plan of each level is broadly similar. Looking at the proposed south elevation, you can see the 2 blocks of flats. The south elevation is mainly glazed, taking advantage of the views to the south towards the Championship golf course. And you can see lying to the west the private dwelling and the former Caledonia, the Caledonia Golf Club's, apologies, to the east. The proposed north elevation is shown in front of us. It's a mixture of cladding, larch cladding and glazing. The proposed west elevation, this is again a mixture of sandstone with small areas of timber cladding and glazing. This is the view from the private dwelling. And from the east, again, it's a mixture of sandstone, larch cladding and glazing, the view from the Caledonia Golf Club. I included this slide, just I thought it was a really good impression of what was proposed. It's taken from the applicant design statement, and it shows the dwelling in relation to Links Parade and the Championship golf course. And again, you can see largely glazing on the southern elevation. Similarly, if a view from the Championship golf course, and again it shows the two blocks of flats in relation to the adjacent dwelling, the adjacent buildings, and the Championship golf course. Moving on to the pictures, this is the context of Links Parade, the current view from Links Parade. It shows Links Parade. The picture on the left shows Links Parade, with the fencing delineating the site at present. And to the right, the view from the site looking out towards the Championship golf course at Carnoustie. Again, another context picture. This is on Taymouse Street. It shows Taymouse. The picture on the left shows Taymouse Street in the immediate foreground, with the application site beyond. Again, fencing, which is partly demolished, delineates the site. And the picture to the right shows Taymouse Street stretching out to the west, with the main East Coast Railway line beyond Taymouse Street to the north. I again included this slide. It shows the site overhead. It's submitted by the applicant in the appeal statement. It shows a good overview of the site, the current status of the site, shows the fencing, it shows the vacant nature of the site, the residential building to the west, and the Caledonia Golf Club to the east. Taymouse Street in the immediate foreground. Standing within the site, this is the site looking north. Again, you can see the vacant nature of the site. You can just see the boundary to the west, of the residential property, and beyond is Taymouse Street with the main East Coast Railway line beyond it. A view from within the site looking east shows Caledonia Golf Club, and to the right is the edge of the Championship Golf Course Hotel. And a view from the site looking west shows the residential property. There's no windows on the residential property on its eastern elevation. And a view from the site looking south clearly shows the Championship Golf Course and the hotel at Carnoustie Golf Links. And that, convener, concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Do members have any questions for Mr. Christensen? Yeah, Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much. Just like to kind of confirm that the floor height will be approximately 5.4 metres higher than the ground level existing.
I think that was what was within the plans. I think that's in the plans. Apologies, convener. I should have also stated that there's a statutory objection from SEPA. So if members were minded to approve the application, then that decision would have to be referred to Scottish Minister. I apologise, I should have indicated that at the end of the presentation. The objection from SEPA relates to fluvial, coastal and surface water flooding.
Can I have it?
Thanks for
Something. As far as I'm led to believe, the problem is with like the Barry burn and with an extreme high tide would be exceptional cases, and the 5.4 metres should cope with any of that high tides.
My understanding, Councillor Nicholl, is that's correct, that the issue is in relation to fluvial and coastal. We actually have a colleague from Roads Flooding Team who may be able to answer the more specific points, if that's acceptable to you.
Thanks, Mr. Christensen. Yes, if I could ask Ms. Kirtsey Matheson to give us her views, because you're here from the Roads Flooding Team to give us your views on this one.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Georgia Kirtsey Matheson. I'm a designer.
Can you put your sound up a bit? You're a bit faint.
Apologies for that. Can you hear me a little bit better now? Can you hear me better now?
A little bit better, but we could do with a bit more sound.
I don't know if there is a problem with the microphone. I'll just stand as close to the laptop as possible. Hope you can hear me a little bit better now.
That is better, yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry. My name is Georgia Kirtsey Matheson. I'm a design engineer for the Roads Department. I advise the Planning Department on planning applications with regard to the requirements of the disposal of surface water, the context of sustainable urban drainage systems, and potential implications for flooding. The planning application that we're talking about in question, it lies within the coastal and the surface water and fluvial flood envelope as given on SEPA's indicative flood map. In addition, there was a recent study by JBA in the area, which is shown the proposed development to be within, again, the combined fluvial and tidal flood map. So it is likely, very likely to be at risk of flooding during an event of this return period. We also have records of flooding in 2009 and again in November 2022 along Links Parade due to a combination of high water levels at the Barry Burn in conjunction with a high tide. SEPA have objected to the above planning application is just because it's going to increase the vulnerability on site. I have reviewed all the information submitted, and I supported SEPA's view on the planning application. I noted some comments in relation to the levels of the proposed development, but there is also the issue that there needs to be a flood-free access and egress from the site, which there is not any report that can support that. And we have seen the flooding just going back to November in 2022 that clearly showed what is likely to happen. So it is contradictory to the Scottish planning policy, increasing the vulnerability on site and allowing such a development. If you have any further questions in relation to this, I would be more than happy to answer.
Thank you for that. And just to confirm that the Road Service are also objecting to the application as well as SEPA. Any questions for Ms Kirtsey Matheson from elected members? Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks, Convener. When you say that development of this site as being proposed and applied for would increase the vulnerability to flooding, are we saying that if that site is developed, then flooding problems could be made worse?
Yes, this is one of the issues that, flooding will be made worse. But there is also, we cannot, in a flooding incident, we cannot guarantee that the people will be able, there will be flood-free access and egress from the development site. It is a vacant site, and by allowing the redevelopment of a vacant site, we will increase the vulnerability of the site, as stated on SIPA's guidance. A vacant site at the flood risk, which is the one we're talking about, can only be suitable for water compatible or essential infrastructure type developments. And this is stated on SIPA's flood risk and land use vulnerability guidance, which I could make it available to yourselves if requested.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Brays again.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Mrs. Matheson. I'm just trying to establish. I understand totally about the flood risk for people who might occupy these flats if built. Totally get that. But what I'm really trying to establish is, if those flats are built, will it increase flooding risk and flooding inconvenience for existing properties that are already there? The neighbouring properties.
Yes, just now this is vacant land, it is a permeable area. Creating any impermeable areas, I have not seen any drainage proposals for the development, but creating any impermeable areas could potentially increase the flood risk to adjacent properties.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Christensen, I see you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Convener. It was just to confirm and draw your attention to National Planning Framework 4 Policy 22, and it sets out, it's a criteria-based policy for flood risk and water management, and it sets out the appropriate circumstances where a proposal may be acceptable. And Part 3, redevelopment of an existing building or site of an equal or less vulnerable use. Development proposals at risk of flooding or in a flood risk area will only be supported if they are redevelopment of an existing building or site of an equal or less vulnerable use. I think it's fair to say that in the instance of SIPA, what they classify residential use as a significantly vulnerable usage, and I think that is the reason why they've objected. It's just their objection was based on, at the time, on Scottish planning policy, which has now been replaced by National Planning Framework 4, and I think the National Planning Framework 4 Policy 22 strengthens probably what was previously in Scottish planning policy. Just wanted to clarify that for you, Convener.
Thanks very much, Mr. Christensen. Any further questions for officers? Okay, I don't see anyone with any questions. Do elected members now have enough information to determine the appeal? Councillor Brays.
Convener, I'm satisfied I have enough information.
Okay, thank you. Everyone else is happy they have enough information. Okay, I shall go round the table in the usual fashion and get elected members' views. Perhaps start with Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. This is a site of a previous hotel, and there has been problems in the past, and the plans put before us, though the policy PV 12, managing flood risks, I would assume that heightening the floor level to 5.4 metres and using waterproof materials, etc., is a sufficient safeguard against this. It is a brownfield site under policy 9 of the NFP4. That area will flood, and it has been noted that the flood period is only for a matter of hours, not days or weeks. and until basically the tide goes down. And there's no way you can drain against it because you're draining against the sea. So other than we start preventing a lot of houses getting built in Carnoustie and hotels, etc., I think the company has put forward a feasible plan, and I would be in favour of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Nicholl. I think Mrs Forsyth has just pointed out to me that Councillor Gall cannot participate in this particular case because this is the second meeting of seeing this particular item, and Councillor Gall wasn't present at the first meeting, so he will have to step out of this item but can take part in the next two items on the agenda because that's the first hearing of it, and apologies we didn't pick that up earlier on. Councillor Brays, do you want to give us your views now? Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Like so many of the ones that come to DMRC, I do find sort of conflicts here. I totally take on board what Councillor Nicholl has just said. It would seem to me that because the floor levels are raised to such a level, it seems that there's a great deal of mitigation to stop flooding actually entering the living space of the proposed flats. However, we have clear guidance through NPF 422, which seems to me to preclude the development here, and I think that's the view I take on this. But I do, just by way of comment, we are going to have to continue to occupy flood risk areas for a long, long time to come, and we do need to find creative ways round that, but I don't think that I can go against MPF 422. So I'd be minded to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brays. Can I move over to Councillor Doran now, please?
Yep, thank you. So I think this is one of the cases where obviously we can't continue maybe doing things we have been able to in the past because of the impact of climate change, and that's noted. Just because something may have existed somewhere before doesn't mean that it's appropriate to then redevelop that area. I think the challenge I have, there is mitigations within the proposal, but it's not clear to me that that would be sufficient given all the discussion that's gone on around this proposal. As discussed, I think if we were to approve it, then it would go to Scottish ministers for approval, so it would be them making a decision on whether or not this is appropriate mitigation. For me, I just don't think we've got enough evidence to say that it is enough mitigation here for this one, and that the evidence relating to the future risk from climate change and the MPF policy 2022 needs to be taken into account. So for me, I don't think we can accept this application.
Thanks, Councillor Doran. Councillor Durno, do you want to give us your views, please?
Thanks, Convener. I've had first-hand sight of this in a flood time about 10 years ago. My daughter was living in that area, and it is very scary when the rain came on and didn't stop. It does go away, but at the time, I think that people in that area would feel quite vulnerable, and I can't approve the application because of that. Under policy PV 12, managing flood risk, and it also says build should avoid areas of ground instability. And as I said before, I've seen the flood firsthand, and okay, if you're higher up, fine, but it's that feeling of you can't get to your car, you can't get to any animals, you can't get to anybody when that water comes down, and I won't approve that on that condition. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor Durno. Yes, I mean, I think probably my views probably agree with the majority of the panel. MPF for policy 22 is quite clear. The applicant is making attempts to mitigate the issues, flood alarms and so forth, but effectively the point that SEPA are making is that this is a high-risk site and it's a vulnerable use, it's residential, and that will increase the pressure on, let's say, the emergency services if you allow another building there with people perhaps trapped inside the building or whatever who can't egress the site. So for me, objections from SEPA, supported by our roads colleagues, I think are serious objections, and I think we need to take note of them. So I think we've only got one member in favour of the development, so if I can just recap by saying that the appeal is rejected, and that's application 22/00646/full. The appeal is rejected. Councillor Gall will now be able to participate in the rest of the meeting, so we'll move on. We're moving on to item 5, which is the land at Hawthorne Cottage, Strathmartin. And again, over to you, Mr. Christensen.
Thank you again, Convener. I can confirm that I have no previous involvement in the application and that I have no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant or any interested party. The case in front of members of the DMRC seeks review of refusal of an application for planning permission for the erection of a dwelling house on land adjacent to Hawthorne Cottage, Baldovan, Strathmartin. The application site measures approximately 2,000 square metres and is located to the north of the Dichty Water at Baldovan. The site lies immediately south-east and adjacent to Hawthorne Cottage at the end of a private access track which serves 4 other existing houses. The Dundee City Council boundary is located to the south of the site beyond the Dichty Water. The site currently consists of a grassed area and also contains the walls of a derelict 60 square metre stone building and a number of trees. In front of members is the location plan, site shown in red, the access tracks shown in blue, and I can point out in the cursor, this is Hawthorne, this site, or application site, Hawthorne Cottage lies to the west, and further property, Rhinefield, again to the sort of further to the west, and the 2 other properties which the access track are adjacent to, are in the corner of Baldovan Road and the access. Apologies, did you lose me? I think you might have lost me there. I'll continue. As I was just recapping, there's 2 properties which lie just beyond Baldovan Road and the access track, and obviously Rhinefield and Hawthorne Cottage, which I pointed out. The existing elevations, it's a relatively simple stone building. It's only 60 square metres, and it has a sort of an angular roof, and it has some small openings. Again, the existing floor plans are relatively straightforward, and it's a very simple stone outbuilding. It shows 2 sort of areas of probably formerly storage areas. The proposed site plan, the application site shown in red. The dwelling is almost in the middle of the site. It's a 2-storey dwelling with a single-storey garage, which would be located to the northwest, adjacent to the boundary with Hawthorne Cottage. The proposed plans and elevations. The proposed plans show that it's a 2-storey dwelling with 2 rectangular sections linked with a flat roof. The height of the dwelling is approximately 6.68 metres. A mixture of stone and rough cast with a timber cladding and slate. In front of us is a proposed site section. It shows this is the Dichty water, shown by my cursor, and it shows quite a steep embankment up towards the level of where the site is, and the dwellings would be situated, highlighted here, where my cursor is. To the south is the steep embankment, and beyond that is the Dundee City Council boundary, in effect. The site photographs. The first site is for the site access. This picture shows the site access, the access track. This is just immediately after Baldovan Road. The two dwellings that are use the access track are located on the left-hand side here. The next image on the right is further site of the access track down where the trees are here. This is the access track before it turns the corner and comes down towards the application site, which is just at the end of the track, where my cursor is, and on the left-hand side, lying to the north, is Hawthorne Cottage. Next image shows Hawthorne Cottage. It shows the dwelling and the garage. The application site is immediately to the east of the garage. Just to give a bit of context, the Dichty Burn, the two images here shows this one shows the Dichty Burn clear in view, and the one on the right hand side again shows the Dichty Burn from the application site and shows so that there is a level rise from the burn up to the site. Looking at the application site itself, this is looking into the application site. We can see the stone building. It's a relatively simple, small stone building. And you can see the application site, a mixture of trees and vegetation. The bottom image again shows the stone building. Again, it shows it's largely covered with trees and grass. The application site looking north. The top image shows the site looking north. Again, just the outbuilding just to where my cursor is showing now. You can see again it's mainly trees and grass, and this is really the boundary between Hawthorne Cottage and the application site, because the garage of Hawthorne Cottage can be shown here. And again, the bottom image shows the largely overgrown nature of the site with grass and trees. Again, it's a similar view looking east. Again, we see the site is largely vegetation, grass, trees, and we can see the embankment with the Dichty just to where my cursor's showing now, the embankment to the south. The application site looking west, we can see the stone building just nestled amongst the trees, and again grass and trees. The access track to the site and the four other properties immediately beyond this. And looking south, this is this extent again.
I think you're frozen, Mr. Christensen. We'll just give you a second to reconnect. Are you hearing us, Mr. Christensen? I see you're muted at the moment. You just seem to freeze up.
Sorry, lost a little bit of connection there. I can hear you now, convener.
On you go. Thank you.
Sorry, which part did you get to? I was just concluding. I just concluded the presentation, convener, just to say that the case officer report, notice of review, grounds of appeal, and other information is available in front of members.
Fine. Are all members happy that they've heard the presentation from Mr. Christensen? Okay. If there's any questions for you, and I'll maybe start off, maybe yourself and Ms. Kirtsey Matheson could address the issue, because this is not a new appeal. We heard it before 2 years ago, and at that point in time there were objections from SEPA. Can we just clarify why those objections have now been withdrawn from SEPA?
Yes, convener. The objections have been withdrawn on the basis that the flood risk assessment that was being contained, I think, by the applicant, and also there was a flood study, I think a Dundee and Downfield flood study, shows that the application site lies now with the flood risk area.
Thank you for that. Do you have anything to add to that, Ms. Matheson? On you go. Your hands up.
Yes, sorry. Yes, just to say what Paul has just said, that yes, a flood risk assessment has been submitted part of the planning application, which showed that the proposed development and the land around the house footprint, is out with the floodplain, and on that basis, there is not any objection on the grounds of flood risk.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. So, any questions from other members for the officers here? I'm not seeing anyone putting their hands up. So, do elected members have enough information now to determine this application? Councillor Brace.
Yes, I feel I do.
Okay, all members happy they've got enough information? Okay, we'll just go ahead and again go round the table. Can I maybe start with you, Councillor Doran? You're the local member on this one, and give us your views.
So on this one, I agree with the assessment. Thanks. I agree with the assessment of the officers relating to this case. Although that there's the change relating to the flood risk on the site, it doesn't comply with the circumstances that would allow for the construction of a new house in a countryside location, because it's contrary to policies 9 and 17 of NPF 4, because the doesn't sustainably reuse the brownfield land as it's naturalised and returned to a natural state without intervention. So that would be my view on this one. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. If I can turn to Councillor Nicholl now.
Thank you, convener. I would need to stand by my original decision 2 years ago, and I passed it then. I think it complies with policy 9, brownfield site, and there's no risk of flood now, or very little, and I would pass this as we did originally 2 years ago.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Durno, do you want to give us your views?
Yeah, thanks, convener. I know what Councillor Doran was saying, because I took that in my notes as well. But also on page 58, section B111, it said repairs is not viable to the building that's there at the moment. And on page 60, we've got successful places. Sustainability is supporting the efficient use of resources that will allow people to live, play, walk and stay in their area, ensuring climate resilience and integration of natural positive biodiversity solutions. And also on policy 17 ... reverse as a redundant or unused building. So I'm going to go with the fact that this building that's there at the moment can't really successfully be used for anything positive, and that it could be made into a house. And I am actually going with my colleague Councillor Nicholl on this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Darno. Councillor Gall, can we introduce you to the meeting? Give us your views. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I think it's a large site, it's secluded. We know we've got a housing crisis, not just in Angus, but across Scotland and the UK. I think there's an opportunity to build a good family home here, and I would be supporting the application. I think it's well secluded, it's not going to interfere with anyone, and as Councillor Darno just said, that building that's currently there will never be used. It's kind of sitting there. There's no real use to it in its location, so I would support the application. Thank you.
Wrong one. Thank you, Councillor Gall. Apologies, I was pressing the wrong button there. Councillor Braze, can I ask you for your views now?
Yes, thanks, Convener. Yes, this is a brownfield site. Any issues regarding flooding are no longer issues. And so under Policy 9, I would be very pleased to support this application because, as Councillor Gall just said, and this has been said before, we do have a housing crisis in Scotland, and this will create a new home for someone to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braze. Yes, I would agree with, I think, again, with the majority. When this came before the committee a couple of years ago, which Councillor Nicholl and myself were on the DMRC at that point, there were objections from SEPA. And okay, so Mr. Christensen, I see you've got your hand up.
Convener, I'm happy to wait until you're finished, Convener.
Okay. Was my view. I mean, at that point in time, there were objections from SEPA, and as Councillor Nicholl has said, we approved it, knowing that there were objections from SEPA, and it might well be called in. It was called in, and the reporter rejected the appeal on the flood grounds plus other grounds. Reading MPF 4, which I guess is now the most important document, it really depends on how you treat the site, and an MPF 4 policy 9 talks about brownfield land. Now, the view of officers is that the brownfield land has now naturalised back to greenfield. However, there is still the building on the site, the former bleach house building, which has now been used for, or was used for storing hay for horses or whatever. So if that building is still there, I would regard that as brownfield, and therefore my view is that MPF 4.9 would support that. And I also note the rural homes aspect, MPF 4.17, would support development. And as Councillor Braze said, we have got a housing crisis, and every house will benefit there along the, if you like, the housing chain. So yes, I would agree with the majority in the committee, and I would uphold the appeal. That is planning application 21/
Sorry, Convener, do you want Mr. Christensen to come in?
Christensen, did you want to come in before we finish?
Yes, Convener. I just wanted to sort of highlight that obviously I note that the members have indicated their view, the application before you complies with largely Policy 9 and Policy 17 of National Planning Framework 4 and Policy TC2 of Angus Local Development Plan. As planning advisor, I must remind members that the reasons for reaching that view have to be clearly articulated and must be based on sound planning reasons. So, but that's obviously based upon the development plan and or other material considerations. So the case officer report, which is in front of you, obviously clearly articulates that view of why they consider the application does not comply with those policies, namely Policy 9, Policy 17 and TC2. So I think it's probably it'd be useful for members to sort of express their reasons for approving the application. Would the legal advisor, Mr. McQueen, agree with that view?
Yeah, it would certainly be helpful to clarify in respect to those policies, the reasons for approval in light of the officer's comments.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think I mean, I think the argument before was that the views of the committee who visited the site before, that we regarded it as a rounding off at the time, and that would deal with TC2. Now, that's a matter of opinion. That was certainly my opinion the last time, and having knowledge of the site, I would say that TC2, which, let's remember, is the Development Plan 2016, and is now significantly out of date, and we need to play greater, I think, reliance on MPF4. At that time when we visited it, I felt it was a rounding off. So that was the justification last time for approval on that grounds. I think in terms of MPF4, the key item, I think, is item 9, the policy 9, and the brownfield land issue. And as I say, I find it difficult to accept that a brownfield site has now naturalised when there's still a building on it. That would seem to me it's clearly brownfield. It's a former industrial building which has been lying vacant for a long time, and someone is now proposing to put a house on it. We are generally quite happy to allow that when that's a farm building. A lot of steading developments are built on effectively old buildings, and I think this is very similar. So for me, the MPF 4/9, my interpretation is that would justify approval. I think the Rural Homes MPF 17 is also a plus. And if we want to go back to TC2 in the 2016 plan, my view is it was a rounding off, and therefore that would be justified on that basis. So are elected members happy with that summary? Yes. Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, planning up. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dornan, didn't catch you on the screen there.
No, don't worry. That's fine. I think it's clear where the decision is going to go on this one. I just want to register that if I could record my dissent relating to this one, as I didn't agree with the reasonings behind the support for those policies.
Okay, we've got that, Councillor Dorn. You're registering your dissent. So just to clarify where we are, planning application 21/00707 full is approved, subject to the for the reasons, the mitigation reasons that we've, or the material considerations that I've mentioned. I don't know if we have got planning conditions, Mr. Christensen, to add to this one.
Yes, convener, I'll just get those up for you. If you just bear with me a second, please.
Right, thank you.
Hopefully members can see that. Can they see conditions?
Yes, thank you. They're clear.
Yeah. So first condition, development to which the permission relates must be begun not later than expiration of 3 years from the date of its grant. Reason in order to clarify the duration of this permission in accordance with the requirements of the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997 is amended, and to ensure that it will lapse if not implemented within that period. Condition 2, no development in connection with the planning permission hereby approved shall take place until the following details have been submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. a detailed level survey of the site. The site detailed survey drawings shall show finished ground and floor levels of the proposed dwelling relative to existing ground levels, neighbouring land properties and a fixed ordnance datum point. For the avoidance of doubt, the ground levels immediately around the proposed house shall be set no lower than 73.9 metres AOD. Finished ground levels shall fall towards the ditty water from the house as they do currently, and the finished floor level of the house shall be set at a suitable upstand above surrounding ground levels. Thereafter, the development shall be completed in accordance with the approved levels prior to the occupation of the dwelling house. Part B, precise details of all external roof and wall finishes of the garage. Thereafter, the garage shall be completed in accordance with the approved external materials prior to the occupation of the dwelling house. Part C, a scheme for all hard and soft landscaping of the site, including details of all boundary treatments. This scheme shall include an indication of all existing trees within and adjacent to the site, details of those to be retained and cleared, together with the measures for their protection in the course of development, erection of protective fencing in accordance with BS 5837/2012. The approved boundary enclosure shall be formed prior to occupation of the dwelling house. All planting indicated in the approved scheme shall be carried out in the first planting season following occupation of the house or the completion of the development, whichever occurs first, or at earlier stages, and any plants or trees which within a period of 5 years from the commencement of the use die, are removed or become seriously damaged or diseased shall be replaced in the next planting season with others of a similar size and species. Part 2B, full details of the means of the disposal of surface water. For the avoidance of doubt, the development shall utilise a SUD swath for surface water disposal. Thereafter, the approved drainage scheme shall be implemented and completed prior to the occupation of the dwelling house, hereby approved. The reason, in order that the planning authority may control specified details in the interests of amenity, to ensure that the drainage proposals are acceptable and to ensure the development is undertaken and maintained in accordance with the details. Condition 3, prior to the commencement of the scheme of improvement shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. The scheme of improvement shall include 1. A drawing showing the widening of the access track and or provision of the intervisible passing places at maximum intervals of 150 metres. 2. A construction specification in accordance with the Council's Planning Advice Note PAN 17 Miscellaneous Planning Policies. 3. The provision of adequate means of surface water drainage. And 4. An agreement for the upgrading works with any other owners or persons with rights of access over the track or other suitable evidence of a legal right to affect the scheme of improvements. The scheme of improvements to the access track shall then be completed prior to the commencement of any other works in connection with the planning permission hereby approved. And the reason, to provide suitable access and an adequate level of residential amenity. 4. Prior to commencement of any development works, a comprehensive contaminated land investigation report shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the planning authority. The investigation shall be completed in accordance with a recognised code of practice, such as British Standards Institution, the Investigation of Potentially Contaminated Sites Code of Practice BS 10175/2011. The report must include a site-specific risk assessment of all relevant pollutant linkages as required in Scottish Government Planning Advice Note 33. Where the contaminated land investigation report identifies any unacceptable risk or risks as defined under Part 2A of the Environmental Protection Act 1990, a detailed remediation strategy shall be submitted to the written approval of the planning authority. No works other than investigative demolition or site clearance work shall be carried out on the site prior to the remediation strategy being approved by the planning authority. Prior to the occupation of the development, the remediation strategy shall be fully implemented and a validation report confirming that all necessary remediation works have been undertaken shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the Planning Authority. The reason, in order to ensure that the site is suitable for human habitation. Condition 5, no demolition of or any other works in connection with the development hereby approved shall commence unless a photographic survey of the existing buildings and structures on the application site has been submitted to and approved in writing by the Planning Authority. All external and internal elevations of the buildings and structures, together with the setting of the buildings and structures and any unusual features of the existing buildings and structures, shall be photographed. The photographic viewpoints must be clearly annotated on a plan to accompany the survey. The photographs and plan must be in a digital format and must be clearly marked with the planning reference number. And the reason, to ensure that a historic record of the building is made for inclusion in the National Monument Record for Scotland and in the local sites and monuments record. And there's an informative as well, Convener. Scottish Water advised that the proposal may impact on Scottish Water assets. Therefore, the applicant must identify any potential conflicts with the assets and contact the asset impact team before any works commence. And that's the conditions, Convener.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Mr. Christensen. About the conditions from elected members. Councillor Doran.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask about the bat survey. I know that there were two bat surveys done, one in 2019 and one in 2021. Will the bat survey from 2021 still stand in this case? I understand it lasted a couple of years. And I don't know if that was in the condition. Obviously, there's an old building on the site and trees. So bats can change where they roost. I just wanted to raise that and ask that whether that should be something that's in the conditions related to this one, or if the survey that has been done is still sufficient.
What's your view on that, Mr. Christensen?
I think the survey was probably undertaken. There have obviously been two surveys. I think the survey that was undertaken is probably still sufficient. But it's up to members if they wish to add anything additional in relation to that.
I think I'm detecting that elected members, certainly in the chamber, are quite happy with the conditions that Mr. Christensen has put forward. So I wouldn't be moving that we add another one. And I think if there was a survey done relatively recently, that's probably sufficient. Okay, thank you. We've upheld the appeal subject to conditions which Mr. Christensen has gone over, the 5 conditions. So the appeal is upheld with those conditions attached. Okay, we'll now move on to item 6, which is, just let me get the right page up. That is Smugglers Tavern, item 6, Smugglers Tavern, 65 Ladybridge Street, Arbroath.
Thanks, Convener. I'd like to say a notice of transparency. My parents own this building, but I have no financial or anything with the building now.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Durno. So you're just really flagging up that your family used to have a connection with the property and you no longer have any connection, financial or any otherwise, with the building. Thanks for that point of clarification. I think we could call that a declaration of transparency.
Statement of transparency.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Okay, over to you again, Mr. Christensen, on the third item.
Thanks, Convener. Again, I can confirm that I've had no previous involvement in the application and that I have no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant or any interested party. The case in front of members of the Dmrc seeks review of refusal of an application for planning permission for the change of use from public house to a flat and dormer extension to attic of existing flat at Smugglers Tavern, 65 Ladybridge Street, Arbroath. The building is located within the Arbroath Conservation Area and currently contains a vacant public house at ground floor level and a flatted dwelling at first floor level. The Brothick burn lies immediately, is obviously lies to the east, and there's obviously Ladybridge Street to the south, East Grimsby to the west. The location plan is shown in front of members just now. It shows the application site in red. Ladybridge Street lies to the south. The Brothick Water lies immediately to the east of the site. East Grimsby immediately to the west. The site obviously on a prominent corner within the conservation area. The existing elevations, so the dwelling, so the property, the public house on the former public house on the ground floor, the flat on the residential flat on the first floor. Also worth highlighting the east elevation, which obviously is adjacent to the Brothick Water. Again, we show the existing floor plans. The ground floor plan on the right-hand side shows the layout of the existing public house. The one on the left is the existing first floor plan of the flat that's currently on the first floor level. And the one in the centre is the existing attic floor plan, which obviously isn't in sort of active use at the moment for anything other than an attic space. The proposed elevations are shown in front of you now. The major changes shown in the proposed elevations relate to the dormers within the roof space, and obviously changes to the ground floor windows as a result of the potential change of use from the public house to a dwelling house. Proposed floor plans in front of you. On the left is the proposed ground floor plan, which is obviously just changed from the public house. It shows a 2-bedroom flat. And of the proposed first floor plan, the major change in there is the addition of a stairwell, which takes you up to the attic space where there'll be 2 new bedrooms located. The next plan shows the proposed section and roof plan, shows the level of the Brothick water, and it shows the ground floor where the public house is, the flat of the existing first floor flat with the stairs up into the EU attic space. And again, the roof plan shows the addition of the 2 new dormers on the southern elevation. Looking at the photographs, this is a photograph of the current southern elevation. This is from Ladybridge Street. You can see the little bridge which runs over the Brothick water immediately to the right. And it shows the roof with current, obviously, no dormers there at present. The east elevation shows the blank gable wall, and it shows obviously the Brothick water and the bridge adjacent to the site. The west elevation from East Grimsby Street, it shows the turned corner of the window, both at the first floor and certainly on the ground floor level. The door in front of you is the access to the first floor flat, and that would be retained. And the lower wall below is obviously the rear access and storage area, gardening area, if you like, for the existing flat and property. The northern elevation, this is obviously looking within that area of sort of storage and garden area, and it shows obviously an access and obviously some openings, window openings as well. That concludes the presentation, convener. Just to say that again, the case officer report, notice of review, grounds of appeal, and other information is detailed in the papers in front of you. Again, it's also worth highlighting to you that there is an objection from SEPA as statutory consultee. The objection from SEPA relates to fluvial, coastal and surface water flooding. And again, if members were minded to approve the application, that decision would have to be referred to Scottish Ministers for final determination. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Mr. Christensen. Thanks for clarifying that. I'm really going to ask elected members if there's any questions for any of the planning officer or indeed any other officers on the call. There's clearly Ms. Kirsty Matheson still on the call, and she's the roads flooding expert, so she would be available for any particular questions on the flooding issue. So I think Councillor Durno indicated you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Question for Mr. Christensen. Obviously, I'm aware of the property, and I'm wondering why on the plans there is no mention of the large cellar which is underneath the building, which is on the plans is actually where they have on sited, they have the bins, the outside bins. There is a doorway there that goes underneath the building. It's a considerable size of a cellar. It's about up to 6-7 foot in height underneath the building. That's one question. And also on page 37, we've got bricked up work in the gable to stop the water. There isn't actually a window in the cellar. There's an old-fashioned, looks like a window, but was never a window from God knows how many hundreds of years ago. And on the actual plans, there's no technical information on page 320, which has been submitted by the applicant to consider flood risk in association with proposal. On page 352, the blocked-up window, as I've spoken to before, in the cellar of the public house, that isn't actually a window. And 359, basement-type area, external space, that obviously relates to the cellar. So that's really just what my questions are. Why was the cellar only referred to as a basement and not pointed out to the members the size of the basement? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Durno. Mr. Christensen, do you have any views on any of these points? Are they relevant?
I'm afraid I don't really have a view or about the basement or cellar. I fear I wasn't, certainly hadn't picked that up. In terms of the windows, I understand maybe Miss Matheson will be able to come in and clarify that. I think there was works undertaken in terms of the Brothick water flood prevention works, which required blocking up of a window. Any historical windows, again, not aware of that if they're not shown on the plans, but certainly Mrs. Matheson, in terms of the windows, may be able to add a little bit more on that, because I am aware that there was one window blocked up as part of those works.
Yes,
That's certainly on the eastern gable anyway.
There was a window in the cellar that, as part of the Arbroath flood protection scheme, it was proposed to block the window, and the works have now been carried out as part of the scheme. In terms of, I don't know if you've got any further questions in terms of flooding and the proposed development. Just to, explain that the planning application is for the change of use. On the ground floor, there is a public house, and it is proposed, and the proposal is for a residential apartment, and on the first floor for another residential apartment. There is a flood prevention scheme for the Brothick water, which the current level of protection for the scheme is the 1 in 200 year standard of protection. When it comes to development, and just to add here that based on the modelling report for the Brothick water, the area around the site does not flood for the 1 in 200 year event. However, it does flood for the 1 in 200 year event plus 20% climate change. The current level of climate change based on SEPA's guidance has changed to 39%. So again, there will not be a flood-free access and egress to the proposed development. And the conversion of the public house on the ground floor to a residential accommodation will increase land use vulnerability at the site from the least vulnerable to a high vulnerable use, which is as defined within SEPA's land use vulnerability guidance, and this is contradictory to the Scottish planning policy. SEPA have objected to this planning application, and we have supported SEPA's objection to this planning application. If you
Thanks
have any further questions.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed for that. Any questions for Ms Matheson? From Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. SEPA's objecting to the flood risk. Is SEPA stating that the new flood prevention scheme is not fit for purpose?
Do you want to answer that question, Ms Matheson?
Sorry, as I explained that the new flood prevention scheme only provides a 200-year protection. At the time of determination, when the scheme was determined in terms of the level of protection that will provide, I'm sure there will be a cost-benefit analysis which would have determined the level of protection for the scheme. When a new flood prevention scheme is designed and built, it does not have to comply with the current level of protection, which just to add that it is constantly changing when it comes to the climate change allowance. At the time of the design, the climate change allowance was 20%. Now we're asking for a 39% climate change. So, and this is constantly changing. The flood prevention scheme, it does provide a level of protection, but it is up to the 1 in 200 year standard of protection for the town of Arbroath.
Thanks for clarifying that. Councillor Dorn, I see you've got your hand up. Can you ask a question?
Yeah, thank you. So this is obviously another one relating to the changing picture of climate change, but my question relates to if this is a building that is already there, if there's anything that we could add in within the conditions to relate to changes that they would need to make in order to then make it sufficiently safe for use. That was my question around it, because obviously this is a building that already exists, and it'd be good to have a use out of that space.
Just to add here, yes, thank you for the question. It is an existing building, and because it is a public house, this is within the least vulnerable category. So any proposal within the least vulnerable category of the SEPA guidance would be acceptable. So it could be developed to, for example, if it was office space, but not residential.
Yeah, thank you. You're really saying that if it moves from the pub use to residential, that is a much more vulnerable situation. Other retail or commercial uses might not suffer from the SEPA objection and the objection from Roads Department. I think that summarises it, I think.
Absolutely,
Okay,
yes.
Mr Christensen, I see you've got your hand up. Muted at the moment.
Apologies. I just wanted to clarify and just maybe help Councillor Dorn a little bit. Policy 22, National Planning Framework 4, sets out basically the criteria. I think I maybe mentioned it before, maybe you only read out one part of that. Development proposals at risk of flooding or in a flood risk area will only be supported if they are for Part 1, essential infrastructure where the location is required for operational reasons. Part 2, water compatible uses. Part 3, redevelopment of an existing building or site for an equal or less vulnerable use. Or 4, redevelopment of previously used sites and built up areas where the LDB has identified a need to bring these into positive use and where proposals demonstrate that long-term safety and resilience can be secured in accordance with relevant SEPA advice. So I think as I mentioned earlier, it's the same case. I think for this one, what SEPA are saying is that certainly under Part 3, the redevelopment of an existing building may be suitable, but in this case, because it's for residential use, that is a more flood-sensitive use. So I just wanted to clarify those points of National Planning Framework for Policy 22.
Thanks, Mr. Christensen. That's helpful. Any further questions for officers? Councillor Durno.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Obviously, there's two parts to this planning application, because there's the conversion of the flat upstairs as well, which obviously doesn't relate to the seller of the building. Are we going to do these applications separately?
No, Councillor Durno, there is one planning application. We either uphold the appeal or we don't. We can't split it.
Yeah.
It is what it is. It's one application.
Yeah. So for the applicant, it would probably have been advisable if it had two. Would that have been as the case? Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think we have to deal with the application in front of us.
It's for the applicant to decide.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, convener, that certainly would be the viewpoint that the red line area shows where clearly what the application and the description of development shows what is being applied for. On that basis, the application in front of you is the two parts. It's the conversion of the ground floor and of the attic area. I'm sure Mr. McQueen could clarify if that's correct, if that's his understanding as well.
Yes, thank you. I have indicated to the convener that I agree with that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. So, any further questions for officers? Okay, can I ask if members now have enough information to determine the appeal? Everyone okay with that? Right, okay. Well, we'll just go round the table again and ask elected members their views. We'll start with Councillor Durno as a local member.
I obviously have concerns about this and would like us not to uphold this appeal and feel the applicant could apply for more planning permission at a later date for a different plan or whatever. But I want to keep the as refused as at the moment.
So you're against?
Yeah.
You're rejecting the appeal.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks, convener. I do recognise that this sort of situation is going to become more common because there are a lot of buildings that were formerly used for retail and, for example, public houses that there isn't a requirement for now. And if you can't convert them into houses, then what do you do with them? However, I have to concur with my colleague that because of the flood risk and SEPA's objection, I would refuse this application. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brays. Councillor Gall, have you views?
Thank you, convener. I think my concern is obviously buildings like this are largely obsolete in their commercial setting. The building's already in existence. There's been a huge spend on precautionary measures. I'm slightly concerned that if we take a view of leaving buildings like this when it's in a conservation area, they will just fall into derelict disrepair. You know, what is the plan from there? This won't turn into a pub. This is not going to become a commercial space. We see every town full of empty shops, and I think where there's precautionary measures that are able to find that so many communities are built up around the coastal area, I'm minded to support the application because I think it does provide an opportunity for a family in a central location, close to transport links, etc. Because if we don't, that building will lie empty and become derelict. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gall. Councillor Doran?
Yeah, thank you. I agree in part with Councillor Gall's overview of this. It would be good to see this building being used and developed. although I think it was for an Airbnb rather than for a home. But I think the challenge is there just isn't enough in this application to mitigate against the risks that SEPA have raised. And I think, as mentioned, this is something that's going to come up again as the climate change calculations are refined. It's not something that can be ignored or argued against. There has to be a full mitigation against those risks within an application. And for me, that it's not there in this one, so I don't think it can be upheld. So I'd agree with everybody else that I don't think there's enough to support this application.
Thanks, Councillor Dornan. Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you, Convener. I have to agree with Councillor Gall, and I think we've been spending a lot of money on this flood prevention scheme, and we should be making it relatively flood-proof anyway. So I would be in favour of the appeal.
Okay, thanks. Okay, my view is, and I have a lot of sympathy for the views expressed by Councillor Gall and Councillor Nicholl. However, we've got a very clear objection from SEPA. We've got an objection from the Council's Roads Department, and SEPA are pretty clearly indicating that if we were to approve it, they would refer it to ministers. And given the role of NPF4, I think it would inevitably be rejected at that point. I do think we've got a problem here, you know, but I don't know what the solution is. But we've clearly got national guidelines that we should not be increasing the flood risk to people. But obviously we've got commercial properties now in the town centre that are we can convert into houses because that increases the vulnerability. And it may be that there's no other commercial or retail use comes along. I guess it's probably not our job to try and solve these problems. We have to look at the planning rules and the guidance, and for me this is pretty clear. I'm conscious that there are two members who are in favour of accepting the appeal. So I think I'll move formally that we reject the appeal for the reasons that are quoted in the report. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Durno is seconding me. Is there a counter proposal? You're indicating you're moving an amendment, Councillor Nicholl? No. Okay, you're not. Okay. Okay, if there's no counter, no amendment, then I'll just state that planning application 22/00221 full, the appeal is rejected because we accept the report presented by officers. And that concludes the meeting today. Thank you very much for your attendance.
John, can you stop the live stream, please?